Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Programs September webinar, the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities Annual Report, How Your Data is Used. This is the first of a new type of webinar that we're doing just with our program coordinators and directors to be able to have a connection with them on a regular basis to share important information as we grow quickly with adding many more programs and with all programs working towards improvement. My name is Drew Andrews. I'm the director of the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, and the webinar is being recorded today, and we will share the recording with you. Presenters today also include Cheryl Sandvoss, Claudia Bellapunto, and Drexler James and myself. There are going to be handouts that can be downloaded from the chat window, which can be accessed by clicking on the little chat icon down at the bottom of the Zoom window. Also, closed captioning can be activated there as well. If you have any difficulty hearing the presentation, phone numbers that can be used to call and join the audio via phone while following the slides online will also be posted in the chat window. And so at this time, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. I'll share my screen here. Okay. Let's see if it will let me there now. It will let me share. Okay. So if you will give me a thumbs up if you're seeing the title PowerPoint. Okay. Wonderful. We'll move right along. So our learning objectives, learning outcomes for today are that participants will learn how legislative requirements of the Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act are met by the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. You'll also gain knowledge about Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Programs and student outcomes and the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities activities from July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. So we oftentimes share this slide of the act and the legislative intent. So the purpose and the legislative intent are that the purpose of this section is to increase independent living, inclusive and experiential post-secondary education, and employment opportunities for students with intellectual disabilities through degree, certificate, and non-degree programs, and to establish statewide coordination of the dissemination of information regarding programs and services for students with disabilities. It is the intent of the legislation that students with intellectual disabilities and students with disabilities have access to meaningful post-secondary education credentials and be afforded the opportunity to have a meaningful campus experience. That wording is directly from the legislation. So today we're going to share with you some of the legislation and the reporting requirements. So as you see, this type is in blue, and that means that it is directly copied from Florida statutes. And if you haven't had an opportunity to read the act, I would encourage you to read the whole act. But today we're just going to talk about reporting requirements. And we just wanted to share this information with each of our programs for each of you to know. We know that you've been working on your program reports, you've been working on your student reports, you've been working on end of year reports. And so we're going to start out with the center responsibilities, which is in subsection 5. And it says, one of our requirements is to report on the implementation and administration of this section by planning, advising, and evaluating approved degree, certificate, and non-degree programs and the performance of students and programs pursuant to subsection 8. Now, subsection 8, we're going to be talking about quite a bit today as well, and that is accountability. So, in the legislation in subsection 6, it says institution eligibility and responsibilities. So this is specifically talking to approved Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs about your institution being eligible and the responsibilities. So included in there, by August 1st of each year, an eligible institution that has an FPCTP shall submit an annual report to the center, which at a minimum for the prior academic year addresses the following performance indicators: efforts to recruit students in the FPCTP and the number of students enrolled in the program, efforts to retain students in the FPCTP and the retention rate of students in the program, the completion rate of students enrolled in the FPCTP and related courses as applicable. And number 4, transition success of students who complete the FPCTP as measured by employment rate and salary levels at 1 year and 5 years after completion. So as you see, that number 4 is talking about the follow-up data, the follow-up requirement to follow up with students who have transitioned on from your FPCTP and are now employed. But the first 3 are all information that you as a program share with us. So when we look at accountability, and accountability is an entire section in the legislation. It says the center, in collaboration with the Board of Governors and the State Board of Education, shall identify indicators for the satisfactory progress of a student in an FPCTP and for performance of such programs. Each eligible institution must address the indicators identified by the center in its application for the approval of a proposed program and for the renewal of an FPCTP, and in the annual report that the institution submits to the center. Again, we're talking about the relationship of the application that you submitted. That's why it's tied within the FCSUA community to all of the reporting that you do. In subsection 8, number B, by October 1st of each year, the center, talking about us, shall provide to the governor, the president of the Senate, the speaker of the House of Representatives, the chancellor of the state university system, and the commissioner of education a report summarizing information, including, but not limited to, and here's the list: the statutes of the statewide coordination of FPCTPs and the implementation of FPCTPs at eligible institutions, including, but not limited to, the number of applications that have been approved and disapproved and the reasons for each disapproval and no action taken by the chancellor for the commissioner, the number and value of all scholarships awarded to students and undispersed advances remitted to the center pursuant to subsection 7, whenever there are scholarship dollars that aren't dispersed. And so those dollars are sent back to us. That's part of the report that we're developing. Also, indicators identified by the center pursuant to paragraph A, and the performance of each eligible institution based on the indicators identified in paragraph 6C. The projected number of students with intellectual disabilities who may be eligible to enroll in the FPCTPs within the next academic year, And I'm sure you remember in your application where we ask you for eligible students in your catchment area that could enroll. And then 4 education programs and services for students with intellectual disabilities, which are available at eligible institution. And that's why we compile an annual report and distribute it and have it on our website so that people can see what's available throughout the state at each of your FPCTPs. Another requirement in accountability is that the center, being us, the Florida Center, in collaboration with the Board of Governors, State Board of Education, and other stakeholders, by December 1 of each year shall submit to the governor, the president of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives statutory and budget recommendations for improving the implementation and delivery of FPCTPs and other education programs and services for students with disabilities. Now, one example of this is that those of you who have had a program for many years know that the amount of funding that's been provided through the FPCTP grant has increased over the years. That was one of the discussions that we had with the president of the Senate and the Senate Appropriations Committee. We also share additional informations and needs that FPCTPs have. There truly is support from the state to want to see these programs be successful. So we'll move on from the legislation here for a little bit, and we'll talk about program information. Program information is the first part of your reporting that is sent to us. And in there, we're looking at making sure that all of our programs have met all of the FPCTP requirements. They're offering a meaningful credential or industry certification. They're focused on employment outcomes. They have an inclusive context, that they're no less than half-time, that they have a definition of satisfactory academic progress, and also that you've completed your federal comprehensive transition in post-secondary or CTP program application. Again, the eligible post-secondary institutions, and this is a regular question that we get from folks around the state. The only folks that are eligible to establish programs are our state universities, our state colleges, our career technical centers, colleges, and independent colleges or universities that are not for profit and accredited in the state. So let's look at approved programs. And even since this number, because remember, we're just looking at July 1 through June 30th of 2023 to 2024, but we have additional programs that have been approved. But for this past year's report, we had 7 universities, 8 state colleges, and 15 technical colleges. And here's the list of all of them. We have quite a few that were newly approved. Welcome to Irwin Technical College, Fred K. Marchman Technical College, Ridge Technical College, Travis Technical College, Miami-Dade College, and the University of North Florida. All new programs. Welcome. We also are looking at students enrolled and the number of students and as it progressed. And here you see over 300 students have participated in Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs. We track each year. We develop charts and graphs that depict the progress that we've made and the growth that each of you has made. We also, as we're providing grants, and most of the dollars that are spent with grants are spent on personnel, we also look at who are those folks that are filling staff roles. So when we look at this, we see that director or leadership, the percentage is 10.9, the average percentage. Advising, 611. Employment support, 1211. Academic support, 15.59%. Program coordination, clerical, leading everything is instruction, followed by residential support, social support, and then those that fall within the other category. So let's take a few minutes and talk about the FCSUA grant and scholarships. This year, $19 million worth of grants were awarded. There were 19 million grant awards for program implementation. 2.94 million issued in student scholarships. So for our grants, we had 9 that were continuing grants, new continuing grants, 5 that were initial grants. We had 6 no-cost extensions. We had 6 programs that required additional funds. And we had 3 who continued with the implementation of their previous grant. So these were ones that was not the 3 years and time for them to renew. But those are the funds that are being spent. And when you see that these are significant dollars from the state, and therefore the need for us to report on all of this to them. Next, we're going to talk about the student information. Cheryl?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. As you know, we have kind of 3 criteria for students to be eligible to participate in our programs. The first primary criteria is the student needs to be identified as a student with an intellectual disability as defined in 20 U.S.C. section 1140. In statute, they also reference that a transitional student, and that is a student between the ages of 18 and 26. So I know a lot of us think about that range of students, but to be eligible, that student with an intellectual disability, it says includes but not limited to the transitional age student. So we have that. The student must provide documentation regarding the intellectual disabilities, and this includes any individual plan for employment through vocational rehabilitation or any documentation provided by a licensed physician in Florida or a psychologist in Florida. Also, the student must physically attend the institution no less than half time. So we can't have students just strictly having all their coursework online. So they must be attending the institution. So who are these students? So we have 310 students enrolled in the 23-24 academic year. This is an increase of 36 students from the 22-23 school year. We had 104 students complete this year, and we had 375 over our history since 2017 complete. So this is, I mean, we're making a lot of progress. 57% of our students gain work experience in competitive, supported, unpaid, and other settings. 89% of them maintained academic satisfactory academic progress, and we had an 88% retention rate with our students. Our sex of our students has actually remained consistent, even though we've grown. 57% of our students are male and 43% are female. The next slide shows our race of our students. And I believe this year we're growing, and we have a student who is a natural Pacific Islander Native American. 60% of our students are white, identify as white. 27 are Black, 7 unknown or other. 2% are Asian, and there is no response for 3% of them. And 26% of our students identify as Hispanic ethnicity in our program. The students were enrolled in 1,695 courses, and we had 1,111 courses that were inclusive courses. As students, it was not just designed for students with disabilities. And you can see over time, all of our students enrolled in inclusive courses has increased over time. So we have 286 students this year. And next, Claudia will be talking to us about the credentials that are earned within our programs.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, connecting to what Cheryl was saying, one thing that we are trying to look at closely is what credentials are the students enrolled in our FPCTPs earning. So we want to start putting out something that we compile every year. This table actually takes a lot of effort. We look at all your program information reports, and we also look at all your student information reports to design this table and update this table to include it as an appendix in our annual report. This is just a snippet of it with one of our programs. You will be able to see this table once we have our annual report ready. But basically, it includes every program, every concentration, micro-credential or badge or industry certification that has students enrolled in. So you can see where are our students enrolled. We wanted to start mentioning this because it's one of our purposes is to increase the dissemination of this information. One project that we have and we are trying to tackle soon is making this information available for everyone in our website. So not only we are disseminating this appendix, this compilation, but all possibilities through all the approved programs. So anyone can go into FCSUA.org and can find those programs, those industry certs that any student enrolled in our programs can earn. So hopefully we will get to that soon, but my recommendation is that you look through this table. You can actually go back to previous years currently in our website, but as soon as we have this year's annual report that Drew mentioned is due October 1st. This day will be updated, and you will be able to see across all the approved programs where are our students enrolled. Another pause that we did with the credentials, we actually wanted to look a little bit closer. I don't think that that we have put this out, even that we have not put this out, this information before, but we wanted to share with you because these numbers are they're very good. So we wanted to look at the number of students that have earned a credential in general. So you know that depending on the structure of your program, you might have a setting where programs get into a main path, and then they get to pick a track or a concentration or a CTE program. So 90 students have completed those concentrations. In addition to that, our programs also offer micro-credentials or badges. You're offering all these possibilities to them, and 52 students only this year have earned 52 credentials or badges. And one that I really think that it's very nice, very cool, because we know that industry certifications lead the way to employment. They say a lot, and 103 students only this year have earned industry certifications. So that I think is a very good number to highlight. In addition to that, we want also to look at the picture of how many of those concentrations of all of those are offered through all our programs has been earned. So 97 programs, 97 concentrations has been completed. 111 micro-credential batches have been earned, and 217 industry certifications has been earned. These numbers are higher, of course, because you might have a student that actually it's counted multiple times because it might have earned a micro-credential batch or two of them. But we want also to put this this information out there and make sure that we're thinking about how this information, even that are good numbers, it connects to what our students are earning and making sure that it is a meaningful credential as that is our main goal. Students earning meaningful credentials that lead to competitive integrated employment. So that's where we wanted to look at these numbers very close and want you to see them as well. So we are going to switch gears a little bit. We are now talk about our completers. So Drew started mentioning how is a requirement of the legislation that we follow up on our completers, those students that graduate from the FPCTPs, and we should follow up for a course of 5 years. So that's when you start working on your follow-up reports that you complete every year that are due August 1st in the FCSUA community. And the reason why we also want to put this out, we have a whole section of completers about completers in our annual report. This data is really what it tells that these programs are working. So we need to make sure that we are showing this correctly, that we're making the maximum effort to contact the students, because it really shows the success of our program, the success of our graduates. So we are going to start the conversation. Cheryl talked about this a little bit. This year, we had a 375 mark. This is a cumulative number, but I wanted to mention something that I'm seeing here. So you can see that the increase from last year to this year is actually higher. So we had very good results with students completing FPCTPs when we look at the data that we collected from you during 23-24. So kudos to everybody. So that's great. The students are doing amazing and completing the programs. Doesn't mean that we cannot get better, but I think this is something that we definitely need to highlight. So I want to pause a little bit in here. I wanted to explain how we got to this. We're going to talk about employment. However, you notice that I said we follow on students for 5 years. So the total number of students completing up to this year was 375. So up to last year, we have 271 students completing, meaning that we had to follow up on them starting this year. So every year we change the number of students that we have to follow up, depending on where are those students in the 5-year mark. So this year, we were supposed to receive follow-up reports from 261 students. What does that mean? 10 students already passed the 5-year mark. So the programs that started with us from the very beginning already did the work to follow up with 10 of those graduates for 5 years. So they don't have to follow up with them anymore. So from the number that we were expecting to follow up, 261, we were able to reach 204. That is 78% of what we expected. It is not 100, but it's actually 4% higher than last year. Last year, you were able to reach 74% of our students. This year, we increased to 78%. So that's great. It might not be super high, but I think it's better. And I know that that we push for the follow-ups to be better. And that's why we send that back to you and we ask you, what methods are you using to contact them? Is it email? Is it a survey? Do you have the most recent contact information? So we make sure that we get that percentage higher every year. So this year, we actually, compared to the previous 2 years, I think we were a little bit down. This year, we increased in a 4%. So of those students that you were able to reach, those 204, 137 students were employed. That is 67% of students employed, graduates employed. So that, I think it's a great number also to highlight. Of course, it can be better, but I think that's something also to mention. this is just an example. This is just, we try to look and show so everyone can see where are our students employed. I was very surprised to see that we already have a student working in Brightline in South Florida. So we wanted to put that. We have students working in Panera, but we have students working at hospitals and resorts. So it definitely makes sense to put out there so you can see where are our students employees. And you know that we try to encourage employers to be inclusive and to hire our graduates. And that's one of the reasons why we have the Inclusive Employer Award every year. And we try to highlight the winner, but we also started highlighting the mentions, because I think it's important to recognize everyone that has been nominated because of the great work that they do. Then we look, as Drew was mentioning also in the data, we're supposed to be looking, and I think these are great indicators. We need to look at how many hours students are working. Where are the students working? Are they working full time? Are they being paid minimum wage? So all this we also look at. We include it in our annual report. The first thing that we look is, where are our students employed? What are those top 5 career clusters that align with their employment? So we can see that the top 5 for 23-24, we have marketing, sales, and services for number 1, and hospitality and tourism for number 2, education and training, and then agriculture. Other is actually a category that emerged compared to last year. We're seeing more students that are self-employed. So they are finding their own ways to be employed, and they are reporting this as part of the follow-up reports. Now we are going to look at the median hours per week that the students are working. I want to mention that this top 5 career cluster is actually different from the ones that we saw in the previous slide. So not necessarily the clusters that are employing our students are the ones that are offering the highest amount of hours. So in this case, we have business management and administration, we have students working in transportation, law, and hospitality and agriculture. But we can see that for most of them, they're at least they are in part-time employment in these career clusters. And after that, we look at the salary. So how are our students, our graduates compensated? We see that actually there is a shift a little bit compared to last year. Arts, AV, technology, and communication became the number 1 with $18 an hour. Then we have transportation, then manufacturing, then law, public safety, and security. I also wanted to mention something about hospitality and tourism. If you notice, when I started talking about the cluster, hospitality and tourism is the second most that is employing most students, graduates from the FPCTP. I think it's 42 students. Last year, this top 2 career cluster, which are very consistent, they still are marketing and hospitality. They were not included in the analysis on the amount of hours per week or the salary. This year, we're seeing that those top career clusters are starting to be part of those top 5 for hours and for salaries. That's what we want to see. We would like to see that those areas where our students are employed are able to provide them full-time employment and payment that is above minimum wage.
Thank you, Claudia. We want to take just a minute here to see what questions that you may have about when we're talking specifically about students and programs. Any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or to send a message in the chat. And if someone will be checking that chat for any questions that someone might submit, we'll just give you a moment to ask if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Sure. Yes,
When,
yes.
when you say programs, are you referring to the CTE programs we offer or our programs?
We're
Like,
talking about your Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program.
Okay.
And that's what we should be, yes.
They're not questions in the chat. But I would like to invite our participants to think about data that we have shared so far that have impact them, the numbers that we're sharing. And also, I'm wondering, maybe after we're done with our presentation, if they were collecting their own data, because of course our programs are there any data points that that we are not highlighting that they will think it will be important for us to think about, or they will like to share with us? Because that's really what we're looking at, how our programs doing at the outcomes of our students.
And we did get a question in the chat, and the question is,
Oh, okay.
how much money is in the Florida budget for FPCTPs, and which budget is it in? And this person is asking because they have a new director, and this director is curious of how long this funding will be available. My response to that, and I'm sharing this just simply as a way that you may want to respond, is that the Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act, it's in legislation. And so we're not a grant. We're tied to legislation in Florida, and our funding comes directly from the general fund in Florida. And they fund us in 3 different lines: a line for the center, another line for initial and continuing grants, and another line of funding for scholarships. And since we have begun, each time they have asked, what additional funding do we need? And we have always had remaining funding, even at this point, with us funding $19 million worth of grants this year. We're being funded each year. So you can look this up certainly on the state, on the governor's budget report, but we have typically been funded at over close to $9 million. And this year it went to over $12 million because we had some, as we're using some of our carry forward, and the Senate Appropriations Committee has encouraged us to continue to grow. And so if anyone, but thank you for sharing that. And if anyone would like, I'd be more than happy to, to explain that further if anyone has any question. And someone said, to define inclusive context, Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs are not intended to be a segregated program as we would think of how in the K-12 system years ago, special education was a segregated program. It was oftentimes a portable or another classroom where students went. But more so now it's looked at and students are included. So the intent and to define inclusive context is that the students are participating with their peers that are in the programs that are courses that they are also taking. This doesn't mean that students might not have some time when it's just the students that are part of the FPCTP. But this certainly does not mean that the whole program is where FPCTP students come in, spend the whole entire day together, and then exit at the end of the day. It's intended that they be included with their age-appropriate peers in the programs that they choose and that their interests align with. Good questions, very good questions. Thank you for asking. Other questions that someone might have? Well, we're going to move forward with some other reporting information that we do and share. And so I just want to share this again. You notice that this is blue font. And so that means, once again, it is pulled from the legislation. And in subsection 5, which is the center's responsibility, It is our responsibility to provide technical assistance regarding programs and services for students with intellectual disabilities to administrators, instructors, staff, and others as applicable at eligible institutions by holding meetings and annual workshops to share successful practices and to address issues or concerns. Now, from those folks that I saw sign in and join us, most of you were with us this summer at the PEPI in July. And that is our major workshop for all Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs. We also have a mid-year progress update that takes place in January, and that is for our coordinators and perhaps one other critical team member to participate in, where we're directing things a little more towards leadership. It takes considerable amount of money to fund events like this and to make sure that we're providing professional development, but also to make sure that we're providing you with successful practices in inclusive post-secondary education. Therefore, we include strategic planning. So next, we're going to talk about strategic planning. So we're leaving student or program reporting and student reporting, and we're now going to talk about the information where we're looking in the strategic planning tool, and we're looking at the plans that each program has in the tool. And this is from last year. So this is not from this year. This is from everything, remember, is from July 1 through June 30th, 2023 to 2024. Claudia?
Okay, so as Drew was saying, yes, this includes the PEPI that we hosted back in 2023 and the mid-year that we hosted at the beginning of this year in January. So it looks at all those plans, that planning cycle that we opened right before the PEPI and that you continue to work on during the mid-year progress update when you go in with your facilitator or with us when we are all together and you complete that progress update. And also it looks at when you go back into the tool at the end of the year before we open the next round of planning. So you look at the year and you do an end of the year reporting. So what we do, and most of you are familiar with the technical soundness analysis that the center conducts and shares with you. So this information is from that analysis. And after the mid-year, we will start on the technical soundness analysis for this cycle that we started in the PEPI that we hosted in July. For the year that closed, we had a total of 63 goals. So across all the programs that were in the online strategic planning tool, you wrote 63 goals. Only 18 of those goals were achieved at the end of the year. 42 were not achieved and 3 were not reported. So we have to look at how to improve this, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking at this data to identify areas where we can help you to improve and to achieve your goals. However, we didn't stop there. We also look at the tasks and the outputs, because those tasks, you define them to accomplish your goals. So in here we have actually better results. So you can see that of the 336, so 152 tasks were completed, which actually aligns with the outputs. You know that every task should have an output that aligns with that task in the planning tool. So we see how those completion levels actually align a little bit better. So you are doing a little bit better on completing your task and completing your outputs. There is definitely room for improvement in there. And then we also looked at your outcomes. You also enter the outcomes when you are working on your plan. Drew, could you move up to the next slide?
Yes.
Thank you. So you define your outcomes to so you can measure your goals. And We don't get into that level of detail when we work in the planning tool and what type of outcomes are you defining. But when you are writing your grant proposal, this actually come in handy because we ask you to create a logic model. So we ask you to define your goals, to define the activities that you are going to accomplish and what are going to be the results for that. So we ask you to define those short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. So those outcomes and the planning tool, so we can see that they're kind of even distributed. So we have a total of 154 that you created for this planning cycle. 34 were fully completed, 43 were partially completed, and 35 were not started. I wanted to highlight here that we have kind of a high number when they're not reported at the end of the year. That's why we encourage for you to go through the planning tool and work with your facilitator to make sure that you report on this so we can look at your data and help you in any areas that you need assistance for improving your program.
Thank you, Claudia. Does anyone have any questions on strategic planning? Okay. And then Drexler, if you would, if Drexler's going to talk to you about how we disseminate information.
Thank you, Drew. So all this data that we collect, it goes in our annual report, as we have been saying throughout this presentation, but that's not the only place that this data can be found. We also share this data through a variety of other channels as well. We do this through our social media posts. So one example is every Friday, we take just one piece of data and we share it on our social media channels just as a Friday fact, just to let people know what the center is doing and what our programs are doing. We also create handouts and flyers and brochures that when we are at tabling events or we are going out into the community, we have physical data points that we can hand out to people that they can take home and review for themselves in their own time. We also create YouTube videos and shorts that also share some of these data points, but also get input and perspectives from the programs themselves. So these are just a few different ways that we continue to share this data into the community. And then Drew, if you could go to the next slide. We also last year shared 7 news briefs, which many of you are subscribers to our news briefs. This is also where we share data and information with all of our stakeholders. We also conducted 9 webinars, and this is, again, another opportunity for us to share what the center is doing, but also to educate people on what the programs are doing as well. Conferences are also another major area where we get to share this data. We went to 28 conferences last year across the nation, not just in the state of Florida, but we traveled all across the United States, presenting on the findings that we have to show the impact that these programs have on students, have on the education system, have at these institutions of higher education. And last year at PEPI, at the 2023 PEPI, we had 37 teams, which shows that there's more and more interest in what we are doing because of this data. People are seeing that this is making a difference, and more institutions are saying, we want to get on board as well. We want to be a part of what is happening in the state of Florida. So this data that we collect, it really tells a great story of not just what's being done at the institutions and in the students, but how it's changing the community as well.
So at this time, we're going to take a little time for some additional questions, thoughts, and ideas. And so I'm going to stop sharing and stop the recording.